Welcome to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of Fundraising Day 2011. We're at the Marriott Marquis in Times Square in New York City. My guest now is Megan Galbraith. Megan is Managing Director of Interactive Services at Changing Our World. Megan, welcome.
Thanks so much, Tony.
Megan's topic is integrating your online fundraising, uniting communications, PR, and fundraising for better results. Megan, I suspect you see a lot of silos that you'd like to break down?
Yes, exactly right. That's where we came up with the idea for the workshop. In our client work from the interactive perspective, we're seeing, like everyone knows, that there's a ton of innovation change going on, and the rate of change within the organization to be able to adapt to that with their online strategies is a struggle.
Yeah.
So we've identified what we think is one of the primary challenges as being organizational, in the sense of marketing wanting to do certain things with social media, development having their online fundraising goals, programs wanting to be able to talk to each other within the field or sharing stories about those types of things, your IT group kind of dipping in every now and again. So how do you truly look at it from an umbrella point of view and develop a strategy that satisfies all the goals within the organization, essentially?
Yeah. How do you start to break down these silo walls and get people thinking holistically about the good of their organization as well as their own work?
From my experience, what I've seen is really one, starting with the leadership, some knowledge building there to put some attention and some resources towards it primarily. For small organizations that have people doing 10 different jobs with one person, we've found that we've recommended doing what we call a cross-departmental task force, essentially focusing primarily on interactive strategies. So we've recommended that those core people, people who want to be doing this, if it's not their primary job responsibilities, looking at across the departments, who are those people that are excited by the opportunities, excited by the research and the benchmarking that's out there, and putting a formal name to who they are and having them work together. If they don't have someone leading a strategy, working together to try to bubble it up.
Okay. What are some of the resources that leadership needs to devote to this?
It depends. It depends on if we're thinking about online giving as a whole, looking at what's been brought in over the past 5 years, setting up your own baseline for understanding what your return is, and then determining your resources off of that, basically. But in terms of social media, I think everybody's in the same boat. We're trying to figure out what makes the most sense with the human talent and then how much financial you're going to put in there.
Okay.
I'd say over the past 3 years, from what I've seen and just from conversations with people, and I think most people involved in the interactive space, the research that's coming out now is extremely useful to help us educate our clients about the need for human and financial investment, but also it's starting to wrap some real analytics around these sort of colloquial things around social media, which is key.
Yeah, the analytics. Megan, I forgot to ask you to take your name tag off.
Oh, sorry.
Just because that's okay. Just because it creates a glare with the light. No, creates a glare in the light. So because everybody knows now. Now you know we're live. This is obviously live radio.
Okay.
The analytics.
Yes.
What Google Analytics, obviously very important.
Yep.
Say a little about
Sure.
how maybe a smaller or mid-sized shop could be using Google Analytics.
Sure. Google Analytics is key to smaller to mid and larger, but within the groups that we're talking about here, it's a tool that, one, is supported by a lot of knowledge around from Google, from the nonprofit Google group, as well as being able to get trained on it if you can search it and learn about it. But from an analytic perspective, it allows you to understand who's coming to your organization's website, what kind of content they're engaging around, how they're moving through your site, how they're exiting, how they're coming in, all those types of things. But in addition, it also allows you to develop goals that you can then see if people are achieving those goals. It's free, which is terrific. But again, it's an evolving tool, which I think is really key for smaller nonprofits that don't have people to, they can't always be the experts in every single tool that they have. So I have found that the Google Nonprofit Group is terrific in providing resources and training online and those types of things.
How about the training? Is there enough online support that a small or mid-sized shop could learn to use Google Analytics
Yes.
Wisely?
Yes, and there's also the Google Grants program, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
No, please tell us.
Google Grants is an opportunity for nonprofits to get, I think it's not positive on the dollar value, but I think it's about $10,000 for free advertising or Google advertising.
Oh, Google the AdWords,
yes.
yeah.
So
okay.
what it does is, too, is it allows, it's an application process. Certain organizations, there's definitely restrictions on who can get it and who cannot, but it's a terrific program, and it's part of a suite of opportunities with Google Nonprofit, essentially.
And the training that you said is available, is that only online, or is there actually helplines that nonprofits can call, or is there live help like that?
My understanding of it is more informal in terms of having, tutorials online, YouTube type things, those types of things. But again, then also depending on the size of the organization, a lot of groups outsource to people as well. But I'd say for the smaller to mid, there's plenty online to get you started.
There is, okay, including the video instructions.
Exactly.
So you're not just reading a screen.
Exactly.
Okay.
An interactive piece that shows you how to do things.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's people, again, in speaking to the idea of people, user-generated content, there's lots of people who are creating content that isn't put out specifically by Google. So you can look for those tutorials as well. So.
What are some of the goals? You mentioned having goals. I mean, is that as specific as you want so many unique hits on this particular page, or I guess dollars could be a goal, but I'm thinking very small-mindedly, because this is not my field.
Yeah.
What are some examples of goals that you would have around this work?
Well, we approach it from an umbrella strategy.
Notice how quickly she agreed to small-minded. My small-minded suggestions. No, go ahead.
But it speaks to also sort of the mindset around, and this is something in our workshops we talk a lot about, because people go to the tactical very quickly, and we're trying to elevate that conversation as a practice to be able to say, okay, let's look at this as a whole and say, what are our communications goals? What are our fundraising goals? In terms of the types of goals that those could be, you would say, okay, let's look at the past 3 years with our online giving. What are the vehicles that we used to get those donations? Was it just email? Was it social media? What are the various channels that got us to this point? And helping to set sort of some baselines around that. Now, in terms of organizations, a question that I hear quite often is, well, what's the return? Like, what's the formula? What are we going to get back?
Yeah.
And to my knowledge, and if it's out there, let me know, there really is no true formula like a direct mail model. So organizations are creating it for themselves. They're looking at their data. They're looking at the benchmarks that are coming out from the big, organizations researching these things. People like product software companies like Convio and Kintera, Blackbaud, all those have these research benchmarks coming out. You can look at your organization on the submarket. So if you're a healthcare organization, what are the other healthcare organizations performing online? And so trying to create a system for yourself. And I find the smaller to mid-size that's using that sort of shared knowledge is where they can get to where they can get that spot where they need to analyze themselves.
Well, of course, the small and mid-sized shop always has that advantage of not being so siloed. They can't afford to be.
Yeah.
And so you can use Google Analytics. That'll be your own analytics, your micro, and you can compare these compare your performance to the benchmarks.
Well, Google Analytics as well is specific to website traffic. So depending on the level of the organization in terms of what they've invested for their constituent relationship management software or a variety of things, there's a variety of tools that allow you to track sources and performance. So depending on, some organizations don't have that. They don't have a system where they're tracking how donations are coming in online. Most, so I'd say there's going to be different tools that you can pull and create a dashboard out of that, if that's helpful.
What would you like to see organizations think about? Let's suppose they're just a year old or so, because your work is breaking down walls. So what would you like to see organizations do in their first year that would help prevent walls from being built up between PR, marketing, fundraising?
Well, I think I'd say from the beginning, looking at their overall organizational goals, and then having the foresight to plan and be patient with their planning, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Everything can't be short term.
Exactly.
Every return is not 6 months.
Exactly. And also to try things out. Try different ways of communicating within your organization. I think siloed activity is not reserved just for interactive work. So I think it's a cultural. It's within the culture of an organization. So if it's a brand new organization, most likely the people that are joining it, and this is a hypothetical, would have some understanding of the value and the amazing opportunities that are happening with interactive technologies. So it should be at the forefront of their communications and development plans, which I think for some of the more traditional organizations where they have the more traditional development programs, that's a challenge. But it's also, again, return. So a lot of times if your energies, if you can prove that it's bringing some value to the organization either through qualitative or quantitative, and show that to your leadership, show it to the people making decisions around your budgets, those types of things. So
and the leadership too. I mean,
absolutely,
in a new organization, you mentioned earlier, we were talking about more established organizations, but the tone of the organization, the culture is really set by the leader, which would probably be a founder.
Yeah. And also I think, it's interesting to think in terms of the evolution of the workforce. You're going to have people coming into the workforce that these tools and ideas are part of their nature. It's not something that is a new thing. It's how they communicate, it's how they share content, it's how they talk to their family, it's how they talk to their friends. I'm talking primarily from an online perspective right now, but that's going to come into the workforce if it hasn't already. I mean, it has in many ways. So those are the future leaders of these organizations. So it will, I think, for newer organizations, my assumption, again, it's an assumption, would be that some of the people starting it would be of a generation that is thinking in those ways.
Yeah. Is the role of the board very significant here in trying to, again, going back to your seminar topic, breaking down the walls between marketing, PR, communications, etc.? What's the board's role here?
I think the board's role is to certainly show that it's a priority, or feel or communicate that there's value to these things in their conversations. Again, it doesn't have to be what we really strive to educate our clients about and help our clients with is that this doesn't need to be a separate activity. Interactive is not a separate thing. It aligns with your development goals, it aligns with your marketing, it aligns with your organizational goals. So I'd say in terms of the board's role, it certainly is, if they are on board, in terms of understanding the value and being a champion of it in all of the activities where there's opportunities to integrate it, then that's key.
Yeah. What about the leader of a team in a mid-sized shop who is just not willing to play with the others who are very willing to break down these walls and collaborate? How do we bring that recalcitrant team leader into the fold?
That's a tough question.
Well, it's hypothetically. I'm not asking you to use any client examples by name.
Sure.
But you're a consultant. You're out a lot. You have some difficult unit leaders, department leaders to work with. How do we bring them in?
Go outside of your organization in terms of showing what other organizations are doing as examples. I mean, I think that's a really key. There's a community, this isn't just what's happening in terms of shared information beyond an organization's walls is key to being able to articulate the need to have these types of strategies within your organization. So if that leader is someone who, I would say, if you find that they're resistant to developing innovative ways to reach donors, which is essentially what we're doing here,
right.
I would say show other examples and try to get them on board. And it'll be a process, and that's what you do. All
right. And again, I'm going to go now probably a third time, leadership.
Yeah.
If there's a leadership commitment, leadership can be helpful in bringing the...
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it all depends on what's interesting is who owns it, too. I mean, when we talk about breaking down walls, there's sometimes nobody really owns these strategies. Yeah. So in some ways, I would say, depending on the culture of the organization, we would help to identify who that person might be within the existing talent and say, this is somebody that could really lead this and help drive an idea. Or advising that the organization may potentially need to bring somebody in if a goal is to get to a certain level with their online giving.
I'm with Megan Galbraith. She is Managing Director of Interactive Services at Changing Our World. This is Tony Martignetti nonprofit radio coverage of Fundraising Day 2011. We haven't talked too much about budgeting and maybe cost sharing, because we're thinking about interactive work, interactive services across across departments. What was your advice in your seminar around cost sharing?
Definitely, one of the recommendations we have is looking at potentially identifying task force around these activities, and in your budget planning process to identify where you're spending money across double spending, two, saying, well, who owns it and who needs to be responsible for it, and where should it fall, but definitely looking for cost sharing opportunities. In my previous life before consulting, I worked for an international development agency where I ran the strategic communications, and we were constantly finding ways with the program group, with the development group, to fund the content generation trips. So everything online is content, right? You need to share it, you need to make a compelling case, all those types of things, and the technology behind it, of course. But we really worked hard at learning year after year of saying we don't have the money to do these things we want to do, so how do you do it? So you look at what you're spending in your traditional marketing, you look at who's going on a trip, how can you train them with certain tools like a flip cam or a mobile phone at this point, how can they capture the media to be able to do the various things you'd like to do?
Because the content doesn't have to be high-end, high production value, right?
It depends. I mean, it really
somebody
depends.
with a flip cam can do some pretty compelling video if they're committed to the work and they're on site somewhere. Is that right?
Exactly, and the objective of what that content is supposed to do. You know, if it's building awareness around your cause or your impact, and depending on the channel that you share it with, there's lots of ways to not have to have super high-end, sophisticated production. There are times for that super high-end.
Sure.
But I do think it's, in terms of cost sharing, I think it's an area that is certainly something that needs to be paid attention to, particularly in this area. So.
Megan Galbraith is Managing Director of Interactive Services at Changing Our World. This is Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of Fundraising Day 2011. Megan, thank you very much for being a guest. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It was great.
My pleasure.